are so many crazy characters in Marvel Comics that some just get kind of forgotten sometimes, especially when it comes to villains, because those guys can get defeated and either sent to the afterlife or locked up in prison and we never have to think about them again. For example, we've got Armless Tiger Man. Gustav Hertz worked in a mechanical laboratory in Munich, Germany during the 1940s. Now unfortunately for Hertz, one day his arms got caught in a machine and had to be amputated. While this is a horrible thing to happen to anybody, Gustav did survive the experience and he was later given reading material on how to operate day to day without arms, instead using his mouth and feet to complete daily tasks. Turns out that he was really good at this. Hertz developed ridiculous skill in using his teeth and feet. He even took things a couple steps further. He sharpened his teeth into fangs so that he could bite people, and he even developed above average levels of strength and dexterity in his jaw, legs, and toes, allowing him to bend steel with his mouth, kick really hard, and throw daggers with his toes. He ended up proving how capable he was as a World War II enemy of the hero Angel and Wakanda, where he was completely destroyed by that era's Black Panther. What was really surprising was when he reappeared in Incredible Hercules number 129 to 131 in 2009. He was among a group of individuals that were the Greek god Pluto's jury of the undead, and they together put Zeus on trial and subdued Hercules himself. Past that though, Armless Tiger Man has appeared one more time in Ziggy Pig's Silly Seal Comics Volume 2, number 1 in 2019, and let's be honest, no one really read that. Now, Hulk villains are always a fun thing to talk about because they are either super smart or incredibly powerful, both of which make for a fun read. The character Ravage is one villain that is both of those things wrapped into one, which makes it all the more puzzling that he has completely disappeared. Dr. Jeffrey Crawford was a former mentor of Bruce Banner, who used the Hulk's gamma radiation to cure himself of a debilitating neuromuscular disease, while pretending that he was trying to help Banner cure himself of the Hulk persona. Unfortunately, like a good chunk of others who subject themselves to gamma, Crawford became a big old green monster who was subject to fits of rage. But unlike a good chunk of other gamma mutates, Jeffrey kept his wits and was both an incredibly strong villain able to rival the Hulk physically, but also cunning and able to outthink the Hulk as well. He had this plan to try and become Ravage full-time instead of only temporarily hulking out. Banner had to team up with General Ross to try and bring him down, resulting in a huge brawl between the two Green Goliaths, but it was actually Major Talbot who used a cryogenic inducer to freeze Ravage, and he was kept in suspended animation at Gamma Base being researched for ways to defeat the Hulk himself, and the last mention of him was way back in 1998. What always boggles me is when a villain has an absolutely huge backstory that ties into the Elder Gods and the greater Marvel godly planes, but then they just never show up. For example, Echidna, or Echidna, however you want to pronounce it. Echidna or Echidna was an Elder Spawn, the granddaughter of the Elder God known as Set, who is a big deal in Marvel Comics. Set was the first Elder God to realize that he could steal the power of his other Elder Gods by consuming them, which kicked off a whole massive war between the Elder Gods, turning most of them into demons. So his granddaughter is not someone to mess with. Echidna is the mother of all monsters. She made Angerboda, Cerberus, Chimera, the Lernean Hydra, the Nemean Lion, and the Sphinx, just to name a few. Despite that though, in the modern day, she has been a part of some just straight up sucky teams. In 2013, she became a part of the second Doom Maidens team under Caroline LeFay, who were eventually able to resurrect Morgana Le Fay. And in 2018, she became a part of Namor the Submariner's Defenders of the Deep when he decided that land dwellers weren't allowed in the ocean, and she stayed part of that Atlantean team until she turned on Namor and challenged him for the Atlantean throne and got defeated by Ghost Rider when the Avengers showed up back in 2021. Now, the villain Dr. Bong was a goofy villain even during the Golden Age. He has a metal ball where his left hand should be, and he uses it to create concussive blasts by eye, striking the appendage against his bell-shaped helmet. We actually have no idea how he came to become Dr. Bong, because his backstory mainly just touches on how he was a bullied kid who found power in writing and language, so then he became a very unethical reporter, and then tried to become a celebrity and joined up as a performer with a rock band where he would play different characters, and one of those performances got out of hand when his hand got cut off by a guillotine. I wish I was making that up. Now chronologically, he then appeared in Howard the Duck number 15 in May of 1977 as Dr. Bong with random knowledge of biological engineering and sonics. He faced Howard and eventually She-Hulk, and then in 2010's Deadpool Volume 2, the villain was reimagined just a smidge bit more threateningly as Deadpool's former therapist, and having cloned a team of superheroes, giving his clones regeneration abilities. He then joined a group called the Villains Anonymous, who all had run-ins with Spider-Man, and the last time he was seen was in 2014's Amazing Spider-Man Annual Volume 2, number 1. Now this next one may be one of the more revolting villains out there, and it only gets worse when you learn that Douglas Carmody, the Bogeyman or Boogeyman, was a villain to the Power Pack, a group of kids. Carmody was in charge of the Carmody Research Labs, where Dr. James Power was working to perfect his antimatter power generator. When the Power Pack gained their abilities from the destruction of the generator, Carmody lost his job and essentially blamed the Power Pack for it all. Classic villain backstory. He then went on to hunt the Power Pack, considering them mutants even though they weren't. He stole a battlesuit from Project Pegasus, and using this suit to try and wipe out the Power Pack, he ended up coming into battle with Asgard's Warriors 3 and the New Mutants. Now in Power Pack number 40, a demon named Nastir, I think is how you pronounce it, invaded New York City, and he turned several people, including Bogeyman or Boogeyman, into demons. And for Carmody, he basically embraced it completely, permanently staying as a demon while the others returned to normal. He tried to wipe out the Power Pack again with his new abilities, but then he saw himself in a reflection and went tumbling off a building. That was back in 1988. He appeared one more time in 1993's Cage Volume 1, number 19, facing Luke Cage, where he apparently passed away. But this isn't confirmed, and so he is basically considered missing, which isn't at all a pleasant thought. Now, similar to how the High Evolutionary created the New Men, he also created the Man Beast from a red wolf that he genetically modified. However, unlike the New Men, Man Beast was created using a new isotope which granted him a heightened physicality and enhanced mental capabilities, also granting him a greater level of ambition. He terrorized Counter-Earth, or more accurately, he led a revolt against the High Evolutionary, which, I mean, that isn't really so bad. That guy sucks. But he was eventually stopped by Thor before he could do real damage. He tried this 2 more times actually, being defeated by Wolverine and Kitty Pryde the first time, and then on Counter-Earth, he was stopped by Adam Warlock, who slightly devolved Man Beast, which is kind of terrifying to think about. He would then return again on Earth as the Hate Monger, having seemingly re-evolved back into his normal self, but then he was defeated by Spider-Man, and he was thought to be actually killed, but nope! He actually tried to stop the High Evolutionary again, infiltrating his Knights of Wundagore in the late 90s. Unfortunately for the Man Beast, the High Evolutionary and Quicksilver devolved him back into a wolf, but he's returned from that before, so who knows? Next up is the villain known as Belladonna. Belladonna was actually a Spider-Man villain, but it's more accurate to call her a villain to another Spidey villain, Roderick Kingsley, aka Hobgoblin. But before that ever happened, Belladonna was Narda Ravana, a European fashion designer. The problem was that Kingsley was another famous fashion designer, only one that stole from other designers. Kingsley allegedly stole Ravana's designs and marketed them in the United States, stealing her success, and for that, I guess he had to pay. Swearing vengeance, Narda assumed the guise of Belladonna and put together a small group of henchmen. She used toxic gas as her main tool, creating gas that could dissolve Spider-Man's webs, taking people's lives and having her henchmen dress as the Prowler to distract Spider-Man, all for the end goal of wiping out Kingsley from the face of the earth. The most ironic part of this whole situation, though, is that Belladonna just didn't have the popularity needed to be a lasting villain, getting arrested in 1980, while Kingsley, he became the Hobgoblin, and he's been causing problems all the way up until 2020 and is bound to come back at some point. Okay, so next up is a group of obscure villains made for the express purpose of facing another obscure group of heroes. Heavy Metal was a team made up of a group of cybernetically enhanced, super intelligent animals with weaponized exoskeletons. Can't get much more comic book booky than that. Their team members included Armory, an octopus because arms, get it? Tail Gunner, a vulture, Bloodbath, a shark, Ramrod, a rhino, and they were led by Uproar, a blue-faced gorilla. Now this team was created by Adam Frost of Multicorp as a prototype, privately owned attack force set to oppose the team known as Brute Force, which is also a team of cybernetically enhanced superintelligent animals with weaponized exoskeletons. Also created by Multicorp, but they were created by Dr. Randall Pierce, and these guys were good. Except the problem is both of these teams were really just a part of Weapons Plus, the ones who created Captain America and eventually Wolverine, and they are not exactly the best people around. Heavy Metal was around for 4 issues of the Brute Force comic in 1990, and they have never been seen since. Remember back when I talked about Echidna or Echidna, and we talked about the Defenders of the Deep? Well, this team was basically filled with water-based villains that had nothing better to do, and one of them was a guy called Tiger Shark. So get this, Todd Arliss was a swimmer who took part in the Olympic Games. Cool. He ended up damaging his spinal cord when he rescued a drowning man. Dang. He was so desperate to regain his swimming ability that he then willingly participated in an experiment by the scientist Dr. Lemuel Dorcas. Interesting. The doctor blended Arliss's DNA with that of Namor the Submariner and a tiger shark, because of course he did. This experiment was totally successful, only it completely changed Arliss both physically and mentally. Now he had razor-sharp teeth and gills and had become savage and incredibly aggressive. He became a supervillain and named himself Tiger Shark, becoming an adversary for Namor the Submariner. Now funnily enough though, after years and years of battling against Namor and the superhero community, he joined the Defenders of the Deep, and now he hasn't been seen since 2019 when they attacked an oil drilling platform in Alaska. And last up for today is Bram Velsing. For starters, he has an incredibly strange name that is very obviously a reference to Bram Stoker and his character Van Helsing. So, Bram Velsing, also known as Dread Knight, is better known as an enemy to Tony Stark in the Ultimate Universe. Unfortunately, in the 1610 universe, he just becomes another Iron Man villain that creates another Iron Man-like armor. But in Earth 616, Bram Velsing was actually a Latverian scientist who didn't like Dr. Doom's schemes and was punished by having a mask fused to his face. He became kind of like a villain, but also a servant to Dr. Doom in a way, allying himself with Victoria Frankenstein and the creations of Victor Frankenstein, which would make you think that he was actually a hero, but he was never played that way. He eventually moved on from being just a Dr. Doom villain and has gone on to fight Iron Man on a few occasions, as well as the Black Knight and Spider-Man. He was this really cool looking armored up man with an even cooler mask, wielding a super cool lance, riding a black winged horse. It was dope, but curiously, while he's never actually been sent to the afterlife, his last appearance was serving Dr. Doom in Iron Man Legacy Volume 1 Number 3 back in 2010, and he hasn't been seen since.
The West Coast Avengers get all the weird villains. Cactus is a great example. He is a cactus and he's funny. Literally the first time he's seen in West Coast Avengers 17, Wonder Man laughs at him because he's a cactus. Cactus was created by the Dominius computer from a desert cactus. The computer gave the cactus human-like mobility and intelligence. This cactus is the original, but there are hundreds of duplicates out there apparently. Cactus's powers are shooting his cactus needles at a destructive speed and regenerating quickly, as he is technically a super powered plant. There were 2 other villains created from desert elements alongside Cactus. They were Butt, made of rock, and Gilla, made from the venomous lizard called the Gilla Monster. A super cactus, while funny and cool, didn't stand much of a chance against the West Coast Avengers and was defeated, but maybe we'll see a clone of him somewhere soon. Live action Two Gun Kid or Rawhide Kid can fight it. The leader of the group of desert misfits Cactus was in was Sunstroke. He was a human, however we don't really know how he got his powers. The villain just says he created himself, whatever that means. All he says to explain is that a man's sense of strategy was melded with the power of the Daystar. Merging with this power made him capable of absorbing light and heat. He can also generate light and heat to attack with. He did threaten to melt the armor off Iron Man's back. He fought the Avengers in the desert that day and disappeared shortly after that battle was ultimately lost. He resurfaced to to attend a weapons expo and briefly fought Captain America. He went on to fight the X-Men. Later, he joined the Masters of Evil, but was arrested after the team unsuccessfully took on the Thunderbolts. Echidna is literally mother. She is the mother of monsters, both in Greek mythology and Marvel mythology. She has fought the Avengers standard a few times and was affiliated with the Defenders of the Deep. She helped King Namor keep humans out of the water when the king declared the oceans off limits to everything that wasn't native to it. Echidna was also part of the Doom Maidens. During her time there, she attempted to recruit the Amazons, but ended up fighting the Amazons and losing. Most of her scraps with the Avengers happened while she was on the Defenders of the Deep. Eventually, she fought Ghost Rider and was neutralized by him. Icon among men, literally, his name is Icon. Icon appeared in 2 issues, Excalibur 59 and 60. He was a Wakandan biochemist who experimented on himself with the advanced tech Wakanda had to offer. The experiments resulted in him gaining the ability to turn himself and others into wood. With his new power, he set his eyes on the Wakandan throne. He had the idea in his head that Black Panther did not respect him as a scientist. Not true, by the way. One night during a Wakandan celebration, Icon shows up and starts turning people to wood. Luckily, the Avengers are in attendance, something Icon did not plan for. He does have an ace up his sleeve though. When someone is turned to wood, they are then under Icon's control. Black Panther wouldn't let the Avengers attack the wooden army as they are still technically his subjects. But worry not, out of literally nowhere comes this guy called Jungle Man to distract Icon. Jungle Man gives the Avengers their moment to start the fight, but Icon surrenders very quickly. The reason is because his whole plan rested on taking the throne quickly through fear, because the turning to wood thing only lasts an hour. The change back makes him pass out and he's carried away by Black Panther. Grotesque is hard to kill, for real. He first fought against the X-Men and was the guy that everyone thought eliminated Professor X, but he didn't because it was Changeling, but the energy blast Grotesque took then didn't kill him, and he went on to become a menace to Miss Marvel next. She also hit him with something that should have ended him. He again survived and fought the Avengers. In this particular battle, he was part of a group of subterranean beings that were initially fleeing their home underground because it was being attacked by deviants. Grotesque was a villain at heart though, and later, after that battle, kidnapped Thor's human host, Donald Blake, holding him hostage while Grotesque's lava men brought the living rock to the surface. The idea was that the living rock would then blow up a lot of the surface world. Thor made sure that didn't happen and broke the rock before it could come up. All the energy from the rock supposedly destroyed Grotesque. But he lived. He really is that one Emma Roberts surprise but you thought you'd seen the last of me meme. Turns out the energy just destroyed his body, not his spirit, so that was still floating around. The lava men took that spirit and put it in impenetrable armor, and he went on to fight the X-Men again. Nightcrawler found the cheat code to defeat Spirit Armor Grotesque. He took off his helmet. That's it. That caused the spirit to dissipate. Is this the end for Grotesque? Who knows? He has come back so many times, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him again soon. Making a deal with the devil is a common occurrence in the Marvel Universe. Actor Jason Rowland joined the trend in Tower of Shadows 5 when he made a deal with a demon, acting success in exchange for his soul. The demon was revealed to be Satanish, created by Dormammu and one of the most powerful demons seen by Earth. Jason's side effect of the deal was he looked like a monster, so he stayed out of the spotlight for a few years. He also, in that time, took on the villain name Hangman. Eventually, he met the mercenary group Night Shift and took over the team for Satanish. Hangman convinced the team to give up their souls to him so he could have more fame and power. The only thing was, in the middle of all of this, his group caught the attention of the West Coast Avengers. The West Coast Avengers and Night Shift, while initially at odds, joined forces once the Night Shift realized their souls were in jeopardy. When the two teams defeated Hangman and his master, Hangman left to join another team of villains, the Lethal Legion. The Legion belonged to Satanish, and they again fought the West Coast Avengers and lost. The name Hangman didn't come out of nowhere. He carries around an enchanted rope. The rope can be as long as he wants it to be, and you can't cut it unless he wants you to. Literally, by force of will, Hangman can make the rope uncuttable. The rope is like an extension of Hangman as it responds telepathically to him. but if you hurt the rope, you won't hurt him. Necrodamus was born all shriveled up, his body was incredibly weak. The natural fix here is to turn to dark magic, that's the only thing you can do. Necro discovered that he can gain strength and even a godlike form if he steals the lives of innocent people. Classic move. The first time he tried it, he was defeated by the Defenders. The second time he tried it, he was stopped by the Avengers, specifically Scarlet Witch. She sent his soul straight to Limbo. Eventually, he did make it out of Limbo and fought the Fantastic Four, and then was sent back to Limbo. Eventually, the shriveled man was taken care of by Agatha Harkness when she created zombies to attack him. He did have quite the run though. Agatha, Fantastic Four, Defenders, and of course the Avengers. Even though Necro's physical body was weak, he still had some magical powers like flight, teleportation, energy bolts, and shields. There are actually 3 Marvel characters that have taken on the name Chlorine, and none of them are popular. Marvel keeps trying and it has yet to work. I think they are all villains too. For sure the Chlorine I'm talking about right now is a villain. The actual name of this maybe person was never revealed, but his body is made of chlorine, so he is Chlorine. I don't think this villain is human. He refers to humans as humans, and usually if you are a human you wouldn't make a point to do that. This particular version of the character has only been seen once in Avengers Volume 1 issue 188. In that single issue we meet the whole team of elements actually. There's 4 of them: chlorine, carbon, phosphorus, vanadium, and radium. They are referred to as the elementals, but they are not affiliated with the ones in Spider-Man Far From Home at all. The elementals catch the attention of the Avengers because they are messing with a nuclear reactor. They might have been humans that forgot they were humans. It's complicated. What we do know is that they take humans to this pod connected to the nuclear reactor to rearrange their atoms to make them the desired element. So maybe that's where they all came from. They are trying to create 100 more element people. That is their goal. My guess is they want the whole periodic table. They fail, and the Avengers eventually defeat them. Chlorine did make the team retreat at first though. Since his entire body is chlorine, he can release large quantities of chlorine gas, and that's very poisonous. He doesn't seem to have any other powers past that though. The Avengers defeat the elementals by blowing up the reactor. The mixture of nuclear plasma and their charged atoms breaks down their atomic structures, which is their bodies. So it's presumed that they all, including Chlorine, are done for. But according to the conservation of mass, nothing can be created or destroyed though. It's possible that if the character were to pick up steam, someone could just do some weird experiment and put all the atoms back together and we'd have Chlorine again. This guy was primarily a villain to Thor, but did scrap with the Avengers too. Jared Carstairs was a skilled inventor and weatherman. Jared was not a good person. He stalked a girl to the point of getting fired from being the local weatherman. He couldn't handle not having the weather in his life, so he became Weather Maker. He created a suit that could create weather, not just sunny days, but also rain and tornadoes and lightning and hail. He, a force to be reckoned with. He ended up kidnapping the person he stalked, and that's when the Avengers stepped in. Weather Maker did a decent job of holding off the Avengers until Thor came back and destroyed the suit's power pack. Without it, the Weather Maker was just a guy. He was arrested, but the clever guy hid some weather circuitry in a hollow tooth and used that to escape jail. His escape effort channeled the Godstorm, which had been imprisoned by Thor, and the Godstorm hoped that this weather-crazed man would be his vessel of vengeance against Thor. So the Weather Maker got actual powers from this Godstorm and became Torrent. He ransacked New York City until Thor returned to take him back to Asgard. The guy used so much power, he pretty much exhausted himself. This made it easy for Thor to bring Torrent to Odin and get depowered and sent back to Earth. All of this happened in the Thor Godstorm series from 2001. You know how some people believe that every celebrity is secretly a member of some demonic group or something? Well, Marvel actually did explore that once. This villain's name is Defiler, and he fought the West Coast Avengers. The Defiler is a demon. His particular brand of demon does not reside in our dimension, but does need the life force of others to survive and maintain his powers and his dimension. So he decided to come and kidnap people on Earth. But he did it with style. He arrived to Earth as a rock star. His band was called Corruption of Innocence. Iconic all around, no notes here. It's such a clever idea because people love celebrities, they will follow them anywhere, so it really wasn't hard for the guy to get people to literally follow him anywhere. And when he finished them off, there were hundreds of other people willing to take their place. The Defiler took everything up up a notch at one of their concerts and started kidnapping the entire crowd. That's not even the wildest part of this issue. The whole thing is bonkers. To save all the people that have been transported through the portal to the demon dimension, Hank Pym and Mockingbird go to the dimension with a big rope tied around Pym. There are at least 100 people to save though, and all their life forces have been depleted, so they're all too weak to walk out. The solution: Hank Pym takes a fingerboard, those little tiny skateboards, and turns it into a huge skateboard so everyone can ride it out. The Defiler ultimately does get defeated when he is thrown back into his world. It's presumed that he is gone forever and died alongside his world. The world has nothing on it to feed anymore, so it is presumably gone. If you want to check out all the wacky antics, the comic is West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 38.
Number 10, Mr. Sinister. When it comes to some of the most fearsome villains out there, one of the top ones I think of often is, of course, Mr. Sinister. I know this might seem odd when you consider that he recently was defeated during Sins of Sinister and is also known for being just a mad scientist, but Mr. Sinister is also one of those characters whose brilliance and ruthlessness combined make him one of the most capable villains you have ever seen. Sure, he may have a sense of playfulness and may sometimes seem ridiculous on the page in regards to how fixated he is on his love of capes and how he deals with his own clones so dismissively, but don't let that fool you. Sinister is not someone you would want to go up against. While he was defeated during the events of Sins of Sinister, he also did succeed in completely rewriting all of reality in that event. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? It really does help us out. Number 9, Mojo. Mojo is definitely a creeper, although you probably wouldn't be too worried about him considering how ridiculous he might appear. He also looks like his range might not be as deadly, as I always see him like hooked up to stuff, and I've always wondered what kind of reach that gives him, if any, like if he was chasing you. It seems more than likely that I wouldn't have to run too far to escape him, is all I'm saying. Unless he has like, I don't know, endless extension cords lying around. There is also the fact that he tends to remain within the Mojoverse, but then again, he is so fixated on securing his ratings that there is no low too low for him. So if you end up there, and more importantly, if your performance didn't impress him too much, I'd be very concerned for your safety. Mojo is actually about as terrifying as he physically appears to be, I would say. Number 8, Madeline Pryor, aka the Goblin Queen. Madeline Pryor lately has been more operating as a hero, or at the very least as an anti-hero in the comics, but for far longer, she was known as a villain, so I'm gonna count her for this list as she's only recently changed colors. She is known for being a clone of Jean Grey, which is why I think a lot of folks underestimate her. But she deserves to be respected when you consider that she, being a clone of someone as powerful as Jean Grey, means that she also has insane power levels as a result. She's as powerful, if not, sometimes I would say she's more powerful because she's willing to push it a little harder. Not only that, but she doesn't seem to possess the same level of compassion or empathy when she's acting as a villain. Maddie has also long had a tie to the realm of demons and limbo, initially teaming up with them during the first Inferno fight and currently acting as their queen as ruler of limbo, because that's what she do now. Number 7, Sandman. Sandman might seem like a lame villain because of his name and his appearance somewhat, but in reality, just being a bunch of sand is actually more deadly than it would seem. Sand can be super powerful after all. It can erode almost anything given enough time. It can mess you up both externally and if it gets inside your body, through your nose, your ears. I mean, it could really mess you up from the inside, especially if, like Sandman, that sand of course was sentient. So Sandman can be much greater of a threat than most people might initially think or give him credit for. Honestly, I'm creeped out just thinking about it because sand's creepy. It gets everywhere. Number 6, MODOK. MODOK is often considered to be a butt of many people's jokes in the comics. He's a villain who honestly looks ridiculous, and while there may have been a time when he was terrifying on paper, he has only become more and more ridiculous in the way he's portrayed and in his appearance, I would say, as time has progressed. I mean, he's really just a giant floating head with like little arms and little legs. His appearance in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania pretty much summed up how most readers likely view MODOK. But at the end of the day, MODOK is still a genius, and we've seen explorations of his character, especially in alternate realities, where he's been one of the most terrifying villains around. Ultimate Universe MODOK, I'm looking at you. straight up nightmare fuel. Number 5, Donald Pierce. Donald Pierce is one of those villains that I simply always forget exists. He was huge in the 80s and 90s, but since then has more fallen by the wayside. Although he did reappear more recently in the comics as the ambassador to Madripoor and a member of the powerful mutant hate group Homines Verendi. However, for much of the modern age, I would say he hasn't really been as prominent. Donald Pierce, however, is a master of technology, specifically cybernetics. This has both allowed him to become one of the most terrifying and also create some especially terrifying foes for the X-Men to come up against over the course of his history as a character. He also fits perfectly within a modern era where more and more of the narrative becomes less about humans versus mutants and more mutants and humanity versus AI in the comics, and also in real life, maybe. Number 4, Madame Mask. Look, all I'm going to say is that Hawkeye thought it would be a good idea to underestimate Madame Mask, and it didn't necessarily work out great for her. Oh yeah, we aren't talking about Clint Barton's Hawkeye here, but instead Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, who is one of the main heroes who is faced off with and fought against Madame Mask. Although she's also acted as a pretty prominent antagonist and love interest at times for another major hero, Iron Man. Madame Mask is powerful and obsessive to a fault. She is not someone you'd want either as your villain or even as your ex, as she has had an extremely hard time letting go of grudges. And if you wrong her or she perceived that you wronged her, she will literally destroy your entire life, or attempt to do so, in an effort to just simply get even with you. Number 3, Azazel. Azazel is often thought of as a bit of a goofy villain. This is usually because of his wedged in there kind of connection to characters like Nightcrawler, and the fact that he's a devil wannabe. He isn't actually the devil, or at least it doesn't seem like he really is, but that doesn't stop him from claiming that he's literally sane. Azazel basically sometimes feels like a Mephisto wannabe, but on the other hand, he did at one point threaten to break free of his prison and wreak havoc on Earth by doing one of the most dastardly things ever, attempting to sacrifice his own offspring, only really even ever having them to use them as a bridge to the plane of Earth, to the earthly realm, so that he might become free from the brimstone dimension. And like, he almost succeeded in that, so you know. Number 2, Taskmaster. Simply put, Taskmaster just does not get a lot of love in the comics, or outside of the comics even. He isn't exactly a straight up villain, but he has been known to act villainous on occasion. He's kinda more neutral, but he's definitely been a bad guy before. In fact, I'd say he's probably more a bad guy than a good guy when we're reading stories about him. In all fairness, it just depends on who he's working for as to if he could be considered bad or not bad. He's really just a mercenary, but if he happens to be working for the bad guys, I would say watch out. Tony Masters has photographic reflexes, which means he is very hard to defeat in a fight. This is because he can learn almost any fighting style just by watching it, which makes him immediately able to execute that fighting style and oftentimes master it. He can also learn and pick up skills this way, and it means he can use a lot of our heroes' own moves against them, at least when it comes to straight up fisticuffs and, non-powered combat moves. So long as he's capable of physically doing whatever they did, he can do that. So obviously, if you are a hero that can fly or, like control the weather, that's not something Tony can just like pick up and do. But anything you can do that he's physically capable of, he can probably do better. Number 1, Nanny and Orphan Maker. Nanny and Orphan Maker, not really considered to be major villains or anything, I would say right now, due to the fact that the last appearance I saw of them, they were actually working towards finding their own place together as heroes as part of the Hellions team, tragically sent to the pit after that series as a result of Orphan Maker's behavior, and then Nanny was like, I'll go with Orphan Maker. Oh, this is very sad. But at the same time, they have been villains in the past, and even throughout their time, I would say on the Hellions, Nanny especially, made some questionable choices. Though I would say with both of these characters, for the most part, their hearts, at least, seem to be in the right place. Most of the time. People underestimate them because they are both kind of goofy individually and even together. But Orphan Maker literally is so powerful that he has to wear a containment suit because of how destructive his mysterious mutant powers are. Like, they could apparently destroy the world. That's how powerful he is. And Nanny can influence minds with her powers and her pixie dust. She also has managed to revert adult mutants to their once child form or their child mindset, so like physically and mentally, which is wild. Number 10, Kang the Conqueror. While the future of Kang in the MCU is extremely uncertain with Jonathan Majors being removed from future projects, the fact remains that in the comics, Kang is an extremely underappreciated villain. This is likely because not as many modern comics fans know how deadly Kang can be. If you are more a fan of the MCU, or if you are more of a modern day comic book collector and reader, you might have missed out on some of Kang's most epic stories and most deadly moves when it comes to him facing the Avengers. Although I will say that comics have been hinting at his power in recent years, if you know where to look. Kang is typically an Avengers villain. While he might look ridiculous on paper, many of us comic book fans know to respect him, as Kang is a master of time who has defeated an insane number of Avengers across the multiverse. I'm not as worried for the character's future in the MCU, because the other cool thing about Kang is that he's a time traveler, and as a result, he has many different looks and identities through the years. So it's possible that he could actually be anyone hiding in disguise, laying in wait for the right moment to reveal himself and strike. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9, the Lizard. The Lizard is a villain who often gets overlooked when it comes to Spider-Man fans. Why is this? Because not many people know just how dark and deadly the Lizard can be, and perhaps because the Lizard's alter ego, Curt Connors, is known for being a good man and a scientist. But that doesn't mean there isn't darkness lurking beneath the surface, even with as well-intentioned a man as Connors. And even without any potential darkness within Connors, the Lizard should be dark enough to persuade readers to be intimidated by him and respect him. You also have to think of how terrifying it must be for Connors' consciousness to exist within the Lizard when the creature is completely unleashed and fully in control. It's a complete lack of control in a way that is probably super terrifying for Curt. Number 8, Hunter in the Darkness. The Hunter in the Darkness is an interesting character, and one that honestly we do not talk enough about on Top 10 Nerd. And also super complex, to be honest. Villain, sometimes a bit of an anti-hero or an ally to heroes. While Wolverine did once free the werewolf-like being from a trap years ago, the Hunter still remained an adversary of Wolverine. It has been implied in the comics that there is a sense of camaraderie between the two at times. When we first met the Hunter in Darkness, it was made to seem like, and in fact some characters in the issue did think, that the Hunter was actually a more feral version of Logan. Number 7, Taskmaster. Everyone knows that Anthony Masters is insane when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. He has photographic reflexes, which allow him to learn any fight move or style just by observing or battling against someone, which makes him pretty hard to beat if you don't have some kind of crazy superpower set. Taskmaster might not be on anyone's A-list, but he sure has fought a ton of well-loved superheroes, including Moon Knight. Moon Knight himself doesn't have any crazy superpowers, but he does have a Batman-like ability to strike fear into the hearts of almost all of his opponents, no matter how skilled they are, which was really the only thing that made it possible for him to defeat Tony here. Number 6, Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and more respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. Look at what Mystique managed to do only a few years ago in X-Men's Inferno, or Chameleon in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as other people, but he also is pretty good at hatching his own plans as well. Number 5, Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly, or at least outwardly, powerful when it comes to what she's capable of and her power set, and for this reason many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why I would advise against that. 2021's Inferno issue number 4. In the Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. I mean, that's why we love her, right? Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was in fact resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Quiet Council, and then she was almost successful in enacting revenge on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her for so long. Mystique here proves that while her power set may have become OP over the years, it's still really her mind and her sense of cunning that makes her honestly so dangerous. Number 4, Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be, well, a not so real threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world. Or well, even being defeated, he still kind of did. His plan here was to convince everyone he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, I'm still not convinced, he actually still managed to succeed somewhat. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting him to kill the entire X-Men team and school himself. Yikes. Number 3, Destiny. Destiny is one of those villains that is severely underrated. I mean, most people don't even think of her when they think about Marvel villains. Even when they think about X-Men villains, she doesn't happen to be one of the folks that first comes to your mind. And yet she is one of the most powerful out there, despite being very squishy, honestly. Even dead, she is somewhat of a threat in the comics due to her previously recorded premonitions. You see, Destiny is the lover of Mystique, and her mutant power is that she can see into the future. The more likely a future becomes, the more she can see that future. And her visions have often been known to be quite accurate. We don't have a lot of characters who can see into the future, and most of them tend to be on the hero side of things that do have that power, so it's interesting to see a villain with such rarely seen powers, but especially when you consider, her alignment as a villain. Number 2, Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. You guys know how much I love her. Anytime I do a list like this, she's one of the first people that comes to my mind, and we gotta talk about her. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno story. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, even going on to lead her own X-Men team, nicknamed the Dark X-Men editorially. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and though often forgotten, she really shouldn't be, considering just how dangerous and how powerful she is. Number 1, the Maker. The Maker is the alternate version of Reed Richards. I've always felt that Richards actually might make a better villain than a hero, and the Maker seems to have been this thought made manifest, living proof of it being so. The Maker initially started out as a hero, leader of the team known as the Fantastic Four. However, in the Ultimate Universe where he hails from, the original Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, his and Sue's future of marital bliss was not as guaranteed. And in fact, after the tragedy of Ultimatum and Sue Storm turning down his marriage proposal, Richards got a different perspective on life, which inevitably resulted in him becoming a villain. In this universe, Reed had a rough childhood, and part of where his villainy started was in turning on his own family. A family that had honestly mistreated him for years. Yeah, in this reality, Reed commits patricide and matricide to get back at his parents. And that's just the beginning of his story as a villain. Extremely counter to his Earth 616 alternate.
Coming in number 10 is Kang the Conqueror. Kang is a little bit of an interesting pick for this list, as he totally can be stopped and has been multiple times. Thanks to the advanced time period he comes from though, Nathaniel Richards has an increased lifespan, making him look 40 when he's actually 7 years old. That's fine, that doesn't make him unstoppable. What makes him unstoppable is a couple of things. For starters, as most people know, Kang has a huge relationship with time. A version of this guy exists at almost all moments of the time stream, and not just one version of him, as there have been Kangs from different universes that have shown up as well. So not only can Nathaniel Richards show up at any point in the time stream in any of his numerous identities that all have their own long history, but his alternate universe versions are almost always said to make an appearance in his place. And then, on top of that, until recently, Nathaniel had the ability to transfer his consciousness to another body when he passed away. Nathaniel, Ramatut, Iron Lad, Kid Immortus, Scarlet Centurion, Immortus himself, Mr. Griffin, he who remains, whatever you want to call him, Kang the Conqueror is pretty much unstoppable. Number 9, Galactus. The being formerly known as Galen of the planet Ta lived before the modern cosmos in the previous cosmos. Galen gestated with the sentience of the universe for billions of years, transforming into the devourer of worlds, finding sustenance by ingesting entire planets, preferably those with living sentient beings that have much more energy for him to harness. Now when Galactus destroys and consumes a planet, he is sort of bringing balance to the universe, kind of like how life is given and taken away every day on Earth, which makes him an essential part of the universe. He's known for the destruction of the Skrull Empire and has attempted to devour the Earth so many freaking times. And I guess other planets for that matter too, or whatever. Galactus is also famous for his heralds such as Silver Surfer and the Cosmic Ghost Rider, and so many others. And while they are all powerful beings themselves, usually even before they gain the herald power boost, they don't hold a candle to Galactus himself. His only caveat is that Galactus's power depends on his planet's consumption, so a weakened Galactus has been taken out before, but if he eats like 4 or more planets or something, he's been able to defeat multiple mad celestials all by himself. He's powered by food, and I think pretty much all of us can understand that. Coming in at number 8, Abraxas. Abraxas is the polar opposite of the cosmic entity Eternity. So, being the opposite of Eternity, his whole reason for existing is to destroy all of the multiverse, which, I'll be honest, there are a few different characters in Marvel who exist for that reason, and funnily enough, a bunch of them are on this list. Abraxas is tied to Galactus too, because when Galactus would consume a planet, it would keep Abraxas in check. So, when Galactus is taken off the board in Galactus the Devourer, Abraxas is released and begins his path of ultimate destruction. As a cosmic entity, Abraxas' powers are essentially limitless, and his whole existence is kind of important to the universe, which means he can't really be taken out like a normal villain. So, how the heck do the heroes come out on top against this guy? Well, in Fantastic Four number 48 to 50, we learned of an incredibly powerful weapon called the Ultimate Nullifier. It was used back then to threaten Galactus and stop him from destroying our Earth. Now the heroes, specifically Reed Richards, ended up using the Ultimate Nullifier to essentially rewrite reality, destroying reality and remaking it so that Abraxas just never existed. That's the route we had to go to here. Kinda makes you wonder why Marvel would even write such a powerful villain in the first place, but if you're enjoying this list so far, well, we've got a ton more like it on our channel that you should definitely subscribe to. Or you could just give a thumbs up to this video, that's also helpful. Thanks. Number 7, Mephisto. Within the Marvel Universe, Mephisto is, for all intents and purposes, the devil. He isn't actually. Technically, he is a demonic hell lord who rules over his own hell-like dimension and enjoys stealing people's souls by tricking them, and he does that by pretending he is the actual devil, playing on people's fears, so basically, he's the devil. While Mephisto is within his dimension, which he calls hell, he is immortal, omniscient, and impossible to destroy. It's only when he ventures into other realms that he can be defeated, but doing so just kind of returns him back to his own dimension. He has been a major player in the Marvel Universe since his creation and has been either a key or supporting player for many major events. He was the snake in the old Adam and Eve story. He was directly responsible for the creation of Ghost Rider. He's infamously erased the history of Peter Parker and Mary Jane's marriage in order to save Aunt May's life. I mean, he even popped up a hotel out of the ground in Las Vegas that manipulated the citizens and let him take their souls. He has been defeated and outmaneuvered multiple times, but he has never permanently been stopped. Number 6, the Phoenix Force. Now it's important to say the Phoenix Force is not a villain, technically. It is a cosmic entity representing all life in the Omniverse. The Phoenix Force will exist as long as there is, was, or will be life. If the Phoenix Force were to be destroyed, if that were even possible, all life would follow after it, as well as the ability for life to have begun in the first place. The Phoenix Force is just a force of nature, but it has been used as a darker force of power in the past. For example, when it inhabited Jean Grey during the Dark Phoenix Saga. It was at this time the entity was a villain, using Jean's insane levels of psychic power, which it then amplified to godlike levels. With this entity inhabiting her body, Jean and the Phoenix destroyed an entire solar system and attacked her fellow X-Men. Jean had to actually bring her own end just to stop what was happening, and when the Phoenix regained its memories of all the evil it had done, it brought Jean back to life to help make things a little better. And that's not the only time. There was the whole X-Men versus Avengers thing, and there was that time that Thane, Thanos' son, had the Phoenix Force, almost every time the power of the Phoenix Force comes up, it usually corrupts its bearer and makes like a big stink. Like a huge stink. Big old fart. Number 5. Dormammu. Most fans of Doctor Strange know Dormammu. This being composed of pure magic energy rules the dark dimension and spends most of his time taking over other realities as he finds them. He is essentially immortal and capable of wielding godly power over magic, the dead, souls, and pretty much anything, really. When he is in our reality, he can be thwarted and returned to his own, usually by the Sorcerer Supreme, but within the dark dimension, he reigns supreme and cannot be taken down, like, at all. Using his vast magical abilities and the influence of his power, he is constantly trying to invade our reality, and even when he is banished back or he is stopped, he always comes back eventually, and he has been doing this for millennia. Number 4. The Beyonder. The Beyonder is a singular entity with no duplicate versions of himself in other universes, similar to the Phoenix Force. And also a lot like the Phoenix Force, Beyonder is basically like a baby in that he is a younger member of a race called the Beyonders that are a near omnipotent alien race from a dimension outside of the multiverse. He is himself basically a whole universe. It's really hard to explain, but as he observes Earth and the Marvel Universe and the various races, he gets a little curious, and the Beyonder decides to study and analyze life and humanity, good and evil and conflict, and to that purpose he pits Earth's mightiest heroes and villains against each other in the Secret Wars. Now, he did this by destroying an entire system of planets and creating Battleworld from the remains and from parts of Earth, so that's one level of power right there. Beyonder's powers surpass that of Eternity and the Living Tribunal, but that has been retconned recently. And he is capable of manipulating reality to his will, being able to pretty much do whatever he wants and then grant himself any power he wants. It was actually a huge treat though last year in the Defenders Beyond story when we learned that the Beyonder and his race were actually still in existence, and he was now an adult existing with the rest of the adult Beyonders outside of the multiverse and being all levels of wildly insanely powerful. There's a lot I skimmed over here to make it less confusing, but you should just go read all the Secret Wars if you want to see how crazy these beings actually are. Number 3. Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, is an incredibly powerful extra-dimensional being who was worshipped as a god and as a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos, which is where he comes from. Now, as the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. Simple as that. To do this though, from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other godlike deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, which kinda gives us 2 different versions of Unstoppable all wrapped up into one package. You're welcome. Merry Christmas. That's for you. As the Juggernaut is essentially a physically unstoppable force of kinetic energy, unless you're the Hulk, I guess, then you can stop him. I don't know why. Anyways, Sidorak is such a powerful and unstoppable godlike entity that you will even hear magic users invoking his name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. Number 2. The Chaos King. While he is relatively obscure, he is nothing to scoff at. Amatsu Mikobashi, first appearing in Thor Blood Oath number 6 in 2006, was mistaken as the Japanese god of chaos and evil, but in actuality, he was an aspect of the cosmic being Oblivion. Now, Mikobashi ruled and thrived over the earth when it was nothing more than a formless void of primordial darkness. And as such, his goal now is to put an end to creation and bring about a new age of chaos and void and darkness. He is a primordial being who was imprisoned in Yomi, which is the Shinto underworld, which is where he remained for centuries, accruing an army of Oni, which is Shinma demons, and other monsters. Now, during the events of Ares, god of war, Chaos King attacks Olympus after he defeated and controlled the Japanese pantheon of gods, and after the fall of Asgard during Ragnarok. This is what kind of kickstarts his mission in Chaos War, where he slays the Egyptian gods, Celtic gods, Shi'ar gods, gods of Zen law. He takes out Nightmare in the dream dimension, destroys Mephisto, and casts Mistress Death out of hell, making her literally run away. And he releases the souls of the damned. He did all that. He has the power to defeat eternity and is practically unfazed by attacks from the likes of Zeus, God Hercules, Galactus, Silver Surfer, and Thor together could not defeat Chaos King. To win, Hercules had to literally punch him into a portal to an endless void of nothingness, and this was after he destroyed 98.76% of the entire universe. That's a lot. Number 1. Chthon. Chthon is one of the most powerful demons to ever exist. Even though he predates anything like this, of all the devil-like demons out there, including Mephisto, Chthon is the closest thing to the actual devil. He and his Ngari actually ruled the earth before the angel Lucifer attacked them, and that was before Lucifer ever rebelled against heaven and became the actual devil. Chthon himself is responsible for all the witches, werewolves, vampires, and other dark creatures, as well as being the master of the most powerful form of magic, chaos magic, which is the same stuff used by the Scarlet Witch. The Scarlet Witch has altered all of reality with just a fraction of that magic, so yeah, it's a lot. His opposite, Oshter, is one of the 3 beings that make up the Vishanti, and they stand in direct opposition to Chthon specifically, creating the Book of Vishanti in response to Chthon's Darkhold. Other demons and dark sorcerers, including Dormammu and Mephisto, call on Chthon's name to cast some of their strongest spells, and the Sorcerer Supreme, Doctor Strange, was almost corrupted and permanently taken out by Chthon's mere presence alone. He is extremely hard to bring down, and even if you manage to do so, it's only a matter of time until he comes back.